Welcome back to It Tastes Like Burning. This Matt.
This is Jesse.
Appreciate you guys listening. We want to give a quick shout out to a fellow listener that made contact to us over there in the Midland area, a little bit northwest or northeast of there. Hey, appreciate you reaching out to us. We appreciate hearing from anyone. Sounds like he's got a kind of a unique going department over there, and particularly his involvement there. And all I can say is thank you for what you do for your organization. And I can promise you that, it goes back to other podcasts where we've sat here and talked about how much you can contribute. We can contribute as much as your life allows you. And I promise you, brother, that what you're doing, it's all right. Don't worry about it. As always, if you ever feel like reaching out to us and sending us anything, you can reach out to us at ittasteslikeburningcast@gmail.com. You can also find us at Twitter at ITLBcast, Reddit at the subreddit for ITBLcast. And if you're feeling real froggy, you can jump on Patreon and give us a lick. What we have going on today, we're going to dive off right into it. It's going to have two different things, but they're all directly related. So we had a pretty big storm push into our area, and we had a pretty froggy evening off of that. I think we ended up with something like 20.
Yeah, somewhere in that 20-ish neighborhood.
We'll call it 18 to 30 calls in the span of about 3 hours.
Yeah, 2-3 hours.
And I got very lucky and ended up on a 6,000 square foot house with a attic fire, and did my best impersonation of a rope with a mattress with a rope tied around it for about 3 hours. That was fantastic. I don't know how this manages to happen, but I swear to God that the odds of the structure fires that I work, not command, not engineer, that I work, I swear to God, 90+% of them are attic fires. And I end up in the damn attic every time.
Well, and I think part of that is we have a high amount of actual attic fires. Just in our area with lightning and things like that, we go to way more attic fires than I ever remember going to.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's the taller roofs and just kind of the construction, because if everything's a ranch house and a trailer house, the trees are taller than that.
Right.
So, it's just a little different. But I do see that we go to tons of lightning strikes to houses, and maybe that's just because there's a lot of houses and there's nowhere else for the lightning to hit.
Yeah, I don't know. I just know that we go to a ton of them, and particularly, like I said, the fires where I end up actually doing an interior attack. And on this particular call, me and the crew, we were first on, and it was showing at first it was hard to really see anything because it was a legitimate storm, probably wind gusts over 100 miles an hour, no tornadoes, but hail, rain, driving wind. And when we got on scene, just happened to be a perfect bolt of lightning behind the house, and you could see not heavy smoke, but a good stream of smoke pushing out of the ridge cap on about a 6,000 square foot house. And Kung Fu Panda off the truck. Kung Fu Panda rolled off the truck, took a hand line, dived off into the attic. Luckily, they had a scuttle hole entry into the attic. Tried to make initial entry with just taking a pike pole and poking a hole. Pro tip there, if you ever show up to an attic fire and it's not fully vented yet, don't worry about just diving off in there and making a interior attack in the attic. If you can get a hole, small hole, and just start spraying water up there so you can get some steam conversion, that'll do wonders for you. Absolute wonders for you. And it'll put the fire in check and allow you to get time to actually get entry into the attic space.
Yeah, and do something real. What'd you run into? We see it all the time. What'd you run into when you try to jab that hole?
Oh, yeah, no, it was glorious. Like I said, I Kung Fu Panda rolled, hi-ya, and right into decking.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
And in this particular attic, it was about The roof was about 16 feet off the ground.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. This kind of Texas construction that's different from a lot of the rest of the country. And you guys up north are going to think we're just insane, but there's no basement. So,
Yeah, no basement.
So what are you left with? You're left with the garage or the attic. So a lot of these houses, they deck just large portions of the attic for storage for all their crap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's never brilliantly organized and pretty, and it's just piles of basic shit
Oh yeah, no,
in the
it's
attic.
for every cubic foot of crap in what we'll call the visible part of the house. There's an exponential factor of about 75 in the attic space. So if you see 35 tons of crap in that room, I'm kidding you not. There's 1,000 tons in the attic.
Yeah.
It can really be truly terrible. Everyone talks about, like in the classic strip malls, flat roofs, you got the air conditioners above you. Literally in our area, we're concerned about the crap in the attic over your head.
Yeah, because there literally might be a piano up there. Who knows?
Right.
Like it's truly insane. And then you get into what's common in a building practice around here is what's a conditioned attic space. So the building envelope goes to the roof line, which is what y'all had, where it's insulated, usually with spray foam, on the roof line. So the attic is part of the conditioned space. So it's not only an attic fire, but it's also trapping all that heat and gases.
Correct.
Because it's sealed up. Like it's virtually sealed like a room would be sealed.
Yeah,
in a normal
to
building.
not go into a full building construction class, newer construction in Texas, real common to see wood frame construction, open cell foam, spray foam insulation, sheetrock on the inside, and realistically some sort of plastic wrap, moisture barrier, or whatever, and then bricks, tar paper bricks. And that's literally going to go from foundation to peak, and it'll be that way all the way up. This structure, once we were in the attic, looking from the roof up, sheetrock, no insulation because the walls and ceiling, the literal roof structure's insulated. So you go sheetrock, then the studs for the attic, we'll call them joists or rafters, whatever you want to call them, then the decking, and then you have exposed wood, and then you have the actual roof line, the pitch of the roof, with spray foam, and then decking, and then whatever the roofing material is. So they will seal literally from from the peak to the foundation with spray foam.
Which is slab on grade.
Right.
Right. So it's no crawl space there either.
Get up in the attic, and because they literally will air condition the entire space, because over time they found out that if you have this giant hot pocket sitting over the house, that you actually spend a ton of money air conditioning the actual living space. Whereas if you seal the entire house, you're still spending the exact same amount of money without a huge energy sink sitting right above you, whether it be hot or cold air. So we get in the attic, and it's sealed up pretty tight. It barely vented, barely, but the fire was basically out. It snuffed itself out. Another thing to consider in this is you always hear the old air pack discussion. Wear your air pack, don't be stupid. I'm willing to bet dollars to donuts if you were not wearing an air pack in there, you'd have passed out and probably killed yourself with some terrible VOC gas, phosphine, chlorides, whatever ethymethyl kill you is lurking in the atmosphere off of that, because it was literally just decking, the actual roof structure, and the decking supporting the roof that was all off-gassing and venting into that enclosed space. So you're pretty much just breathing straight up formaldehyde and glue.
Yeah, and whatever that spray foam's putting off, which
Right.
it's all bad stuff.
Yeah, man, it's probably a perfect mixture of a little bit of everything. Got lucky on that though. We were able to tackle it pretty quick, which was good because one, I would argue, I don't think there was that much manpower actually available to us in that exact circumstance because there was probably a total of, I'd say, 100 calls in the county at that exact time block.
You had to scroll through the pages of calls, and I've
Right.
only seen that kind of twice.
Yeah. And it's always during big storm.
Big storms, yeah.
So everyone is just scattered 3 sheets to the wind. So realistically, we were lucky enough to knock it down with the first and second engine on scene. Overhaul and mop up took a little while, but a lot of that was just babysitting. Because you had a lot of spray foam to dig through and let it cool, let it sit, let it vent, let it cool, let it sit, let it vent. So I would call it moderate damage over the garage. We'll call it a 1,200 square foot space with a 5,200 foot house saved, something like that.
Yeah.
So we did
some water damage, some smoke damage,
Yeah.
Normal stuff.
nothing pressing into the living spaces though. So we got lucky.
Held it to the garage.
Yeah. And then, there's just 25 other calls kind of all along that line. Just same thing, down power lines, down trees, smoke investigations, odor investigations, other structure fires, accidents, major accidents, catastrophic accidents,
Tree through a house.
tree through a house.
Yeah, there was a plethora
Yeah.
of things going on, and not all of them were ours, but countywide it was a lot of action.
Yeah, and it comes down to mitigation. Again, we had a high call volume. We have a high membership volume, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't send everyone to the one structuring fire that you have at the beginning of the night, because quite frankly, you're going to have a whole bunch of other calls. So, kind of be smart about that. Have a huge storm push through, and just because the first call hits as a structure fire doesn't mean that you're not going to have 6 or 7 others that same night.
Yeah, especially in those random weather events where it's so widespread that you're talking about this thing went from South Texas to Oklahoma. So,
Right.
Our little piece of that pie is relatively small, all things considered.
Yeah. And it's just got lucky. All we had was a ton of rain and ton of horizontal winds, big winds, but we didn't have any naders or huge hail. Or
You had the Forrest Gump rain. It
Yeah.
rained up from the bottom.
Yep, rained up. And then the other thing that I want to talk about, and we'll spend a little more time talking about this, is it all coincides with this event, but 2 different discussions, one that Jesse had with someone and one that I had. And the first one, I'll roughly paraphrase, is, and it's kind of infuriating from my end. As a chief, occasionally you have a directive, a policy, a sternly worded suggestion that comes from the top. And good, bad, or indifferent, sometimes you don't have the opportunity to fully explain it. And you will have, in my case,
And sometimes the explanation is not. It shouldn't have to be explained, because sometimes it's better for them not to know some of those things, right?
Yeah, I'll agree to that.
It's in their best interest to not know why sometimes, but just to understand that thought went into it, and it's a rational decision.
Right. Yeah, and it's not. It's based on the department, whether it be for operations or organizational flow or ease of life. And I get it. Sometimes not everyone gets a memo but it's incredibly infuriating sometimes when you get someone that does get the memo and they just don't get the purpose of it, and here's where like the rant and the kind of the suggestion comes from. Stop taking everything so damn personal. There are decisions made quite often that don't take you into consideration. It's for the betterment of the organization, it's for the ease of life. It is for a multitude of other reasons.
I would tell you that most of those decisions don't specifically take anyone into account. Like, it's not about an individual ever.
Right. And when someone gets all fired up and angry, well, I can't do this anymore. Or, well, if you guys keep enacting rules like this, no one's going to show up. Okay, don't show up. Because for the love of Christ, we need someone that can actually understand how an organizational chart follows and be able to actually take something into consideration beyond yourself. It really is that simple, to think beyond yourself. Just once. Try it. I encourage it. And it can be really difficult, particularly from the chief end, when you have something pop up, and kind of just because we're speaking so vague here, I'm trying to think of like an offhand scenario.
And here, I'll just create a scenario that doesn't fare with anybody or anything. But say you're a department and medical calls are 80% of your call volume. And a directive comes down from the top that says, we're not going to go to all these, because we're seeing this in the news all the time, and it's big departments are making these decisions. We're not going to go to all these calls anymore because it's literally a burden on the system. We're going to go to the priority ones and as requested. And then you're going to hear that one guy that's, well, somebody's going to, we've got to be here for our citizenry, and we've got to do this, and that's your scenario. That's where it works out. That explains this. There was probably a whole lot of discussion about all of those things and what the actual benefit for the citizenry is of us going to all these I can't poop calls. That wasn't a lightly made decision. There was a lot of thought and a lot of discussion and a lot of time and energy and effort put into the research of what the benefits and risks, and frankly the risk to the community of you bellowing around in your truck, lights and sirens, to go to help, I can't get off the toilet. What is the risk of that?
No.
And that goes right in line with what happened here, just a different circumstance, right?
Right. Yeah, and it is. It's just, it's such a, if you're a new firefighter and you're trying to make the argument for or against a new policy based on how it affects you, I'm not going to say that you're necessarily wrong, but before you ever ask the question, you need to really actually try and think out why that thing, policy, agenda item, recommendation, suggestion, rule, whatever, where it's actually coming from. Because it's actually usually almost universally rare that an individual generates a new absolute policy or rule.
And if it does, it's named after them, right?
Right, literally.
They
get to live in perpetuity for decades afterwards.
The Sammy Smuckleweed policy, right?
Right.
Sammy, he crashed into the busload of orphans, and now we don't drive the wrong direction on the road at 120 miles an hour.
Wearing binoculars backwards.
Yes.
Yeah. And even though that might be your favorite hobby, it's literally not about you. And it does. it's one of the harder things being a chief is when people start making that argument for them themselves and how it affects them and their self. And it's like, wow, boy, you were really not in the ballpark of how this actual organization runs.
And there's so much pressure on organizations, and we see it. I read an article the other day in Pennsylvania on the Pennsylvania EMS system. Just it's literally being crushed under the weight of the call volume and the lack of people and the lack of volunteers and all that stuff. And these organizations are always having that crushing pressure on them to one, staff adequately, respond timely, provide the level of service that the citizens expect, provide the quality of care, all these things that are always pushing in on the organization. So if you come up with a way that eases some of that pressure, that whether it's shifting it to another organization or just changing policies on response, what responds, who responds, any of that stuff that eases some of that pressure, that's for the benefit of the organization and the benefit of the individuals. Now, the guy that, he's going to gripe because he doesn't get to run 72 residential fire alarms a day and keep his call volume numbers up because they doesn't work or whatever the situation is, because he doesn't get to run all over the place code 3 going to the my smoke detector battery needs to be changed, or whatever the stupid thing is that's not really warranting a full-fledged emergent response, right? That, who cares? That guy can get over it.
Yeah. Yeah, again, it's such a try and not take everything from such a self-centered point of view. It's really hard from a chief to take someone serious that's always arguing from the me point of view. It's stressing to try and make that argument.
I'll throw this out here, and I could never go to a single call and still be happy being a member of the fire department. I could never get in the truck and go to a call. And I could do all the other things that I do with training and public events and all those stuff. And it would still be rewarding to me and would still be a positive part of my life to be a member of the department. And I could never go to a call.
Right.
Now, was I like that when I was 25? Absolutely not. But it's still just as rewarding if you put the effort in the things that aren't necessarily those glory items, right?
Well, and it goes to other conversations that we've had where we've talked about what is someone's quote unquote worth to the organization, and it boils down to what qualifies as contribution.
Right.
And if you're young / new to an organization, you literally only see it from the perspective of call volume and physical work put in.
And in their defense, what else do they really have to contribute at those early stages? Nothing else. They don't have knowledge, experience, insight. There's so many different things that they're lacking at that point of starting out that there's really no other way for them to contribute than to sit in a seat.
Right.
And I get that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just it's a real short-sighted view of the organization as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, it's because at the end of the day, it's such a small part of the total scope of practice and operations for the organization as a whole, because the call response is literally the whole purpose of why you have everything else.
Yeah.
The training, the tools, the equipment, the certifications, the meetings, the station cleanup, the inspections, the testing, on and on and on. And all of that stuff takes exponentially more time, energy, and effort than the total call volume.
Yeah, I would just venture to say that if you're not spending 3 times as much time tending to your organization and your stations and your trucks and your people and your training and all that stuff as you are actual on scene time, that something is wrong with that formula. Like
Right.
it should take 3 to 4 times as much time to tend to all the other parts of being a volunteer fire department as it does actually being on a scene working.
Right.
Yeah, that's if you're spending 100 hours a week, let's say, at accumulated scene time amongst your organization, which would be pretty low, 100 man-hours, but you're only spending 10 man-hours of maintaining your truck's equipment and personnel and training a week, that your organization is doomed because
Right.
you're everything's gonna be broken. You're not gonna have anything, and nobody's gonna know what to do.
Nope. Yeah, and it'll fall apart pretty quick.
Yeah,
And that kind of is something that you see, particularly in a department that has, and it's kind of a couple of dominoes that stack up here, where you have a longtime chief and I'm going to say kind of a crusty old codger following of that chief. And when you run one of them out, you run all of them out. And then all of a sudden, yeah, the membership's happy because now you don't have a whole bunch of dinosaurs to deal with. But 6 months later, everything's really, really rough. Well, it's because you literally lost everyone that did everything and knows how to do anything. And now you're left with a whole bunch of people that got a whole bunch of learning to do, but at least they have nowhere to go.
right. Or nothing to go in.
Nothing to go in, yeah. So it's a delicate balance, and you kind of got to be careful with it. And at the end of the day, just kind of close my part of the conversation up is just, Christ, be an adult, try it. It's awesome. And stop worrying about how everything is just about you, and actually maybe consider like the full scope of the operation and what's the actual cause and effect.
Yeah, and you've got to be looking at, some of the things we do today are not for today. Some of the things we do in the organization, in any organization, and specifically ones that rely on volunteer labor, some of the things we do today are not for today. They're for 5 years from now. They're for 10 years from now, because there's a long perspective vision of what the future is going to hold, right? We can see trends, we understand, and to lock yourself in, and it's a huge one. We talk about that 300 years of tradition impeding the progress in what we do, and if you're not looking out there in the horizon in the future of what the organization's going to be, and you're seeing that, our call volume is 1,000 calls this year, and it's gone up 100 calls every year for the last 10 years. Well, you know that 10 years from now it's going to be substantially more than it is now, right?
Should be.
Should be. Well,
It's kind of how math works.
you're right. And if we know that we're losing a member a year to age and retirement and all these things, or they're moving because our local economy's drying up, or whatever the case may be, you can extrapolate that out to figure out that in 10 years there's going to be one person left.
Right.
So to do the same thing, it's that Einstein deal, right? Do the same thing and expect a different result. If you're doing the same thing and you're not looking forward, and you're not having some vision of how to change that. And I'm not saying that everything you do is going to work. Probably most of the things you're going to try are not going to work. But don't say, well, we tried one thing and that didn't work.
Yep. Just take that guy out back, beat him with a hose filled with sand, and call it a day.
Yeah.
The beatings will continue until morale improves.
Because it's literally 4D chess figuring out how you're going to make these organizations live for the next 100 years. You know, most of these organizations have been around 100 plus years, some since the 1800s, and it's literally your job and your responsibility to figure out how to make it be here another 100 years.
Yeah. Ideally.
And that goes on along the lines with the guy that, you know, you have a vote in a meeting to do a certain way and have a policy or go a certain direction with something, and then that one lone dissenting vote says no, and then that guy does everything in his power to stop it after the vote.
Yeah. Yeah, and here's the kicker in that particular scenario. Okay? So we're going to pretend that the scenario is that every single business meeting, every single time that a new member gets voted on, the department gives them a ice cream bar for joining the Junior Woodchuck Club. Okay? And it is a welcoming gift. Now, imagine that you have 30 people on your organization and 29 of them give the new guy ice cream. Okay? What do you think the new guy is going to think of the one abstaining person that doesn't give him ice cream? He may not have an opinion out of the gate, but he's going to think it's odd. Why is the entire department supporting this, but this one guy isn't? And then his argument and justification is I don't like it. You're different. I don't like different. You're a different idea. I don't like that. It's madness. And the thing that blows my mind on that, this is again, stop thinking like an individual. Stop being a spoiled, self-centered brat. The world doesn't revolve around you, and actually consider what the hell you're doing to yourself, dummy, because you're putting yourself on an island. When that one person got voted on the department by 29 other people, and all you had to do was support him in one simple facet. And not only do you refuse to do it, you make a point about not doing it. You got to think about the position that it puts you in.
Well, fast forward, and let's just fast forward that. So you bring one of these guys shows up every month, and they get voted in, and they get their 29 plus 1 ice cream bars, right? And that one guy is still holding out on that ice cream bar, and he hasn't given it to any of those new guys. Pretty soon, all the old ones leave and go.
Right.
And then they're literally set there with all the people that they spoke out against or didn't like or whatever happened. And now they're the majority of the department.
Right. And you need something from them.
Yeah.
They ain't going to do a damn thing for you.
Except vote you off the island.
Right.
That's what happens.
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how star-spangled awesome you are. It doesn't matter your experience on the organization. Doesn't matter what your training, your education level is. None of that matters. Because quite frankly, at the end of the day, it's not about one individual. It's about the team effort. And you have a team of 29 and you have one retard. Yeah. And they want to single themselves out. Well, they're going to get baby seal clubbed, whacked in the head with a boat oar, and pushed away from the life raft. And it's going to be in that time when they need them. And that's just the way that works.
And if you're struggling in the team environment, and we talk about this, but trust me, we're not struggling in the team environment. No. Our team functions very well. there's always outliers, and there's always people having a bad day, and there's always little things. But as the whole, the team functions very well. But if your idea of team building is being a dictator, or alienating people, or doing things, and I'm the world's worst. I'm a terrible boss to some of my employees. I mean, I'm the most condescending, hateful person on the earth, and I don't like that. I don't like doing it, but I fall into that trap of just my personality, and then my frustrations get the better of me, because I'm very witty, and I'm very good at cutting deep with some words. I can do it. But I don't like doing it. I don't want to do it. It just happens. But if you're that guy in that situation, don't be surprised when you're all alone on the island. I mean, it's a little bit different when you're writing a check to people,
Sure.
and you get a little bit of leeway to be an ass sometimes. But if you're just an ass to be an ass, and a group of people that are wanting to be there because they want to be there, and there's no other real incentive,
Yeah, well, it just won't work. I mean, you
they're-
might have great ideas, you might have grand plans to be administrative or rise up in the department, but it's going to boil down to the basic smell test and memory test. That person was a douchebag to me.
yeah,
I don't like them.
Yeah.
I like Jimmy. We're going to nominate Jiminy. Even though he's over there cleaning the windows with his tongue, we like him.
yeah,
And he brought me ice cream. He was nice. He wasn't condescending. He wasn't rude. He wasn't unnecessarily mean. He didn't tell me that I was useless. He didn't tell me I was stupid. He didn't tell me, I'm not going to do this for you because I don't like you. I mean, let's take it a little more serious, because that's literally what you're setting yourself up for in a volunteer organization. And when you start trying to make a point by trying to make other people look foolish or stupid or incapable or incompetent at your own benefit or your own ideology, and there's no basis for actual logic, rationale, reasoning, practical application for what you're doing, that literally just makes you an ass. And you will be universally hated, and you will be ultimately adequately rewarded by never accomplishing anything in the organization by pulling a stunt like that.
and if by some stretch, and I'm self-critical of that, because I literally am pretty damn bad at it. I'm horrible in my personal business, but if you're that guy, you better be right 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And trust me, if in the volunteer fire world, your chances of being right 100% of the time are about zero.
Yeah, per day. There, every now and then there's like a blue moon and like the planets align and stars are crossed, and you manage to make it one full day without being wrong about something. Cherish that moment.
Yeah.
Outside of that, you need to be expected to be full of fail, and just realize that and move on.
That falls back to we plan for the worst and hope for the best, right? And truly, that's it. Like, it's literally, there's so many factors that are beyond your control, beyond your capabilities of harnessing the world around you to make something happen. You're just not. It's not going to work out. Rarely. Like, it's rarely going to work out to where it's just the perfect scenario and the perfect ending, and everybody skips away holding hands running, down the yellow brick road. That's not the way this works. This is a lot of failures.
Mm. There's I think we've talked about it before, where both of us have a hobby of being builders and makers, and I do a lot of woodworking, and Jesse does a lot of just straight up building of random awesomeness across the board. And the trick to being an absolute master woodcrafter is not your ability for perfection. It's your ability to recognize your mistakes and be able to work them into the project, incorporate them into the project, and to a certain extent, hide them. Now, in this case, going to a volunteer fire department, in my personal opinion of being an exceptional chief, is your ability to recognize your mistakes, work around them, work with them, acknowledge them, and continue to do better
And learn from them.
and learn from them. And there's a little bit of a parallel there, in the crafting sense. Why do one thing when it takes 19 hours when you can do one thing that takes 6 minutes? The only thing I'd ever counter to any of that is it self-centered or is it better for the organization? Because that's something that you do have to weigh. Because there are times that you make decisions that are self-centered for the ease of running the organization. But if you communicate that and don't try and hide it and just explain what the hell's going on, everything be all right. Yeah. But if you're on the exact opposite end of that, where you're literally doing everything in your power to work against the membership because of personal philosophy, and we're not talking about, legitimate SOPs or SOGs. We're talking about literally difference of opinion. It's a personal thing, and you're working against one member, two members, 12, half, 2/3, 95% of the department. You're screwed. You're an idiot. You'll accomplish nothing, and you'll go nowhere, and at least no one will ever take you serious.
Well,
now they may
you'll be the most hated person around, right?
Yeah, well, and they may placate you. Yeah, oh yeah, that's a great idea. Damn, I wish I'd have thought of that. That's a good idea. And then sit there and just laughing like Huxley the dog off a speed racer behind your back. And, people are making sworn blood oaths against you. Yeah, I mean, like I said, stop taking yourself so serious and thinking that you're the best thing since holes in Swiss cheese and fighting literally an entire group of people that thought it was a good idea. Maybe a little introspective meditation needs to occur there to understand it. How did an entire room full of people understand this and I didn't?
Yeah. And sometimes it's... And I realize the gravity of what we're doing and the fact that people's lives and people's property and our lives and all this stuff is in the balance of everything that we're working with every day. But the reality is sometimes it's just an experiment, right?
I was just about to follow. I had no clue where you were going, but I was going to follow up with something like that. So
yeah, it's literally an experiment to figure out what works and what doesn't work. And the idea that we know, 100% know that we don't fight the same fire that we fought 25 years ago.
Right.
We don't use the same tactics we used 25 years ago. We don't use the same truck that we used 25 years ago. We don't do any of that stuff the same way we did it 25 years ago. Why would we not evolve our organization in the same manner?
Now, the one thing I'm going to add to that, okay, and kind of the cheesy example I'm going to use is, let's say that you're the longtime member, and I'm going to give like two different examples. One is that you have a new applicant that you have experience with. They used to be on the organization. No one else on the department knows this guy and what they were like when they were on the organization and the problems that they caused. Okay. And then the other example I'm going to use is just personal experience with, I'm going to say, tools, trucks, equipment. You could even go as far as to say vendors, or, maybe it's a local politician thing. But there's a certain point there where if the department is fighting you tooth and nail, and you might be right. Here's the kicker. You might be right. Okay? But there are times that the department, that it's just the membership, and it's probably because you're that guy, they're not going to fully heed your advice and your recommendation. And there's nothing wrong with literally chalking it up to an learning experience and letting them learn. Don't be afraid to be vocal about it. Point out when things are going right or wrong, but start pointing out things like, hey, I told you guys about this. Hey, I told you to watch out for this. Take a look at this. This is what's happening. There's a certain point there where you might be right, but you're the dissenting voice and you're going to lose. Just roll with it.
And
You can be a voice of guidance, clarification, and wisdom in that time, circumstance, or whatever situation.
and I always encourage the dissenting voice, right? Be the dissenting voice at the meeting. Be the one that brings up the holes in the plan. Be the one that says, I don't think this will work because of this. But then once that vote happens and it's decided, whether it's what you wanted or not is irrelevant.
Right.
That's literally what it is now. And I think the dissenting voice and the dissension in the proper context of that discussion is super valuable, because so many of the things we look at are so one-sided, right? We all want new T-shirts and we all want them to be like this, and we're going to get everybody 50 T-shirts, and the one guy that says, wait a minute, do we need 50 per person? Is that appropriate? That guy's got a point. Listen to him.
Yeah, and the kicker is I mean, and again, we're speaking in basic, vague language and trying to be kind of circumstantial and circumspect, but I mean, it really is these two points that we're talking about. They're universal in their application in almost any discussion or circumstance or scenario in an organization. That's why we're trying to not specifically just say X, Y, and Z, because each situation is going to be different and should be handled differently. But understanding these 2 points, that there's sometimes that you either need to ask more questions for clarifications for yourself, but the directive's coming from on high for a reason. And then number 2, if the body, the membership, and the administration all universally agree on something, then no one appreciates an individual in that situation and saying, damn it, I'm not going to do this just because. It's just those two things go hand in hand in a lot of different situations.
So I'll kind of wrap this up with a story that's I heard, and this is a hearsay story. So, and I'm not going to tell you where I heard it at, but of a department, small volunteer fire department, that so it's set up with a chief and a president, so they're kind of dividing the responsibilities in those roles, where the chief is the operations of the department, the head of the department, the president's in charge of the board with the money and all that stuff. And so the president happened to be the previous chief.
Okay.
They had a new chief, been there, been a chief a couple years, couple, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever the number is, I don't know. But the guy's been doing an adequate job. May not be the greatest chief ever, may not be the worst chief ever. But the president decides, that guy's gone on vacation or whatever, is not able to be here, calls up a meeting and initiates an election for a new chief. At that point in time, when a large chunk of the department's not able to be there, gives the notice, puts it out the 2 days ahead or whatever the requirements are, does all that, but does it when it's vacation time. Let's just say that's what's going on. And so there's a large group of the department gone at that point. Has a meeting, holds an election, and basically forms a coup and makes himself the chief again. Like, there is no situation and no circumstances where that's ever going to be the right move.
No. Even I would even argue if the chief his vacation was to prison in that exact circumstance and scenario, that's not the way to do it.
That there's no time that's going to be the right decision.
Wow.
And you need to think about that scenario right there and what happened in that scenario and what the root causes and what the motivation was, because that was purely
self-centered
motivation,
yeah.
Right? And there's no way to back that out and make that not self-centered motivation. It was a good sales job because whoever he convinced to vote for him or whatever, but at that point, it's a no-win. He's never going to be trusted, number one.
I don't know how you could take someone serious like that.
Never going to be a trusted chief. Never going to be a leader to the other half of the department that was not able to be at this meeting, that were supportive of the other guy or whatever. And even if they were supportive of him, you literally watched an underhanded takeover, a coup, happen before your eyes. So how does the neighboring departments take that seriously? How do the citizens take that seriously? How does anybody take that whole event seriously?
Yeah.
And that's the extreme end of that argument of going against kind of the will of the department and
the problem is with a stunt like that is that particular stunt has the ability to have reverberations and repercussions that literally last like a decade.
Oh yeah,
if not longer. I mean, it could even go into two different generations. Take 20 years to get that.
Yeah.
Get that dealt with.
And the reality is, it doesn't just affect your staffing, your manpower, any of those things. The people that just don't trust it, all that, it affects your fundraising. It affects your mutual aid. It affects your citizenry. It affects your response times. It has far-reaching effects farther than what you can imagine, for the simple sake that you wanted a title.
Yeah. Well, to basically be like an extra free indentured servant. Yeah. That's asinine to pull a stunt like that. Whew. When did that happen?
In the last year.
I would assume the department's still having trouble with that.
I would assume. I haven't talked to anybody, but I heard the story kind of third hand, and I know where it is, and I know the people involved. But at the same time, I only heard one side of it. But even at a one-sided story, how do you justify the other side of it?
I've seen some pretty wild shenanigans here. Years ago, there was something kind of similar like that happened, but it got quashed by the handful of people that showed up. So I mean, I guess my point is that they didn't appreciate it, and it got Baby Seal clubbed actually pretty aggressively, and the chief never needed to lift a finger on it.
Yeah. Well, and
so I mean, I guess I'd say, if anything, kudos to the health of the overall membership, because there was people there that didn't necessarily agree with the chief at the time, but they saw it for what it was and hammered it pretty hard. I mean, hard.
And that's one of the reasons why some diversity in your organization, the constant and perpetual growth of your organization, the fact that you have a mix of young guys, old guys. And I realize that everywhere that's not possible, right?
Mm-hmm.
But having that group of diverse people prevents a lot of things like that from happening, because there's just enough people to not ever. You've got to work for consensus.
Right.
And good strong bylaws and organizational documents helps that too.
Yeah. Good membership. That's rare, though. I mean,
Yeah, I'm sure
that's don't get me wrong. There's feathers that get ruffled everywhere, but that's even extreme on the extreme end of extreme.
yeah. But it all boils down to don't be that guy.
Smaller department or bigger?
Small, very
Okay,
small.
yeah, I was gonna say, 'cause something
Yeah,
like
you
that.
couldn't do that in a bigger department. There'd be no way that
Yeah.
you'd ever pull a stunt like that off. It doesn't matter who you are. You could be the best thing to ever ship between two shoes, and it's just you can't do that. You can only do that where a quorum is 2 or 3 people, and the organization's small enough that you could manipulate 5 people and make that happen. You could never do that where you had to manipulate 25 people.
Right. Or 50 or 60 or
Yeah.
100.
Yeah.
Well, that's all I had. You got anything else?
No, it was good discussion.
Okay. Well, guys, don't forget, if you ever want to reach out to us, I'll rattle it off real quick. You can shoot us an email at ittasteslikeburningcast@gmail. You can find us at Twitter at itlbcast, Reddit at itlbcast, and go ahead and give us an appreciative lick on Patreon. Outside of that, this is Matt.
This is Jesse, and I want to touch on that. You join our Patreon, we'll send you a sticker. Or a handful of stickers, right?
Yes, stickers.
We got stickers.
We have stickers.
So, y'all have a good evening.
Thank you.